The morning sunlight filtered in through the towering windows of the computer science classroom at Evergreen Prep Academy, casting its glow on rows of polished leather chairs and 30 brand new MacBooks shimmering like the treasures of the future. This school nestled in the wealthy suburbs of Chicago was not just an educational institution, but a symbol of excellence, a place where the children of businessmen, lawyers, and executives were trained to inherit the world. The air here always carried a subtle fragrance of success, a blend of high-end espresso coffee and the fresh plastic scent of expensive tech equipment. The students, mostly 12 and 13-year-olds in bespoke uniforms, sat comfortably, their fingers gliding over keyboards without a glance, as if technology was a natural extension of their bodies. In the far corner of the room, Jamal Washington sat quietly, his old ThinkPad laptop, a recycled item from a charity program seeming out of place like a relic from the past. Its screen was slightly dim from years of scratches, and the fan whined every time he ran a complex program. Jamal, the only black boy in the class, was a scholarship student, a token the school proudly flaunted during recruitment, but in reality he was more tolerated than welcomed. His uniform was well fitted, but not made from the premium fabric like his classmates. It was a discounted piece his mother Keisha had saved up for with her nurse's salary. Jamal didn't speak much, didn't join in the conversations about summer vacations in Europe, or the new cars his friends' parents drove. He focused only on the screen, his fingers rapidly typing notes, trying to blend into the darkness of his corner to avoid the stares. Professor Harold Bennett, a middle-aged man with half of his hair gone grey and neatly trimmed moustache, walked slowly in front of the class, his voice echoing like the proclamation of a prophet. He had been teaching for over 3 decades, and his reputation was intertwined with Evergreen, where he had once been an outstanding student and now a tenured professor. Artificial intelligence, he began, his voice deep yet tinged with a hint of contempt, is nothing but a complex hoax, dressed in the guise of creativity. It's no more than a pattern-matching machine, a technological joke that can never replace the true mind of a human. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, lingering just a bit longer on the students he considered the real future, the rich white kids whose relatives were alumni of the school. Jamal felt that gaze like a needle piercing his skin. He knew exactly what Bennett was thinking. He didn't belong here. From the very first day at Evergreen, Jamal had felt that isolation not from direct words, but from the subtle gestures, the half-smiles, the questions like, "Where are you from?" with the underlying tone of "You're not like us." His mind was a mess, a mix of anger and inferiority. Why did he have to prove himself every day? Why was his talent always questioned because of his skin color and zip code? But Jamal said nothing. He had learned from his mother. "Stay calm, son. Let your actions speak for you." So he lowered his head, fingers gripping the edge of the desk, trying to suppress the emotional wave rising in his chest. Bennett continued now with a bit of excitement as he spoke about the assignment. "This week you will prove the limits of AI. Use any AI tool to complete a project, but the goal is to highlight its limitations, that it can never replace human creativity and critical thinking." He paused again, his gaze sweeping the room, and this time it stopped squarely on Jamal. "Some of you might find this assignment more educational than others," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm as though aiming his words directly at the boy in the corner. "Perhaps you should reconsider whether this class is truly the right fit for you. Some students are simply not built for high-end technology." The words hit Jamal like a punch in the gut. His heart-pounded blood rushing to his face. Not built. What did he mean? Because he was black, because he was from Southside, where people thought it was just crime and poverty. Jamal's throat went dry and he wanted to scream that he had been coding since he was 8, that he had built his first neural network at 10 without any guidance. But he remained silent, his eyes glued to the laptop screen, trying to hide the slight tremor in his hands. Inside, a mix of anger and fear bubbled up. Fear that if he spoke up, he'd be kicked out of the school, losing the only chance he had to escape the vicious cycle of poverty. Ethan Bennett, the professor's son, sat in the front row with his ever-present confident smile. He raised his hand, his voice loud as though giving a speech to an audience. "Professor, I mean, sir, if we already know AI is limited, why are we wasting time on this?" The class erupted in laughter and Professor Bennett smiled proudly, his eyes twinkling. But then his gaze returned to Jamal, a silent challenge in his eyes. Jamal took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. His mind suddenly flashed back to the past, a vivid, brief flashback like an old film reel playing in his head. He remembered being 8 years old, sitting in the Southside Public Library, the only place with free computers. His mother Keisha worked night shifts at the hospital and often came home late with red-tired eyes. "I have to work extra to pay the bills, sweetheart," she'd say, her voice trembling as she hugged him. Jamal had witnessed her cry in secret over the electricity bill, and he decided to do something about it. With self-taught knowledge from old library books, he wrote a simple Python app, a program that predicted his mother's shifts based on the public hospital schedule. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for him to plan his study time, enough for him to feel like he could change something. "I'm going to be a programmer, Mum," he whispered to her that night. "I'll make life better." That flashback sparked a power in Jamal, turning pain into motivation. The lesson ended with the bell ringing, but Bennett continued outlining the assignment. "You will present in a week. The process documentation, and remember the goal is to prove human intelligence is superior." The students began to pack up their laughter and chatter echoing. Ethan walked past Jamal's desk, whispering loud enough for him to hear "good luck, scholarship." "Maybe AI can help you write a simple essay." The mockery was like a knife, but before Jamal could respond, Alex Chen, the Asian-American student sitting nearby, whispered, "Don't mind them, Jamal. You're better than they think." Jamal nodded, but inside a fire had ignited. He watched Professor Bennett leave the classroom, his back straight like a proud statue. This was no longer just an assignment. This was an opportunity to prove that he belonged here, not just that, but to overturn the prejudices that weighed on him. As he walked down the hallway past display cabinets showcasing the badges of wealthy white alumni, Jamal whispered to himself, "They'll see. They'll all see." The small apartment of the Washington family in Southside Chicago was bathed in the dim light of an old desk lamp, the only illumination in the tiny living room. The walls stained with dampness, and the hum of the old refrigerator blended with the distant sound of police sirens, a familiar soundtrack of the neighborhood. Jamal sat at the kitchen table, his ThinkPad laptop buzzing like an aging beast, the screen displaying dozens of browser tabs about AI bias, machine learning, ethics, and neural network architectures. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but his mind was ablaze. Professor Harold Bennett's assignment was not just a school task. It was a challenge, an opportunity for him to prove that he not only belonged at Evergreen Prep Academy, but could surpass the low expectations others placed upon him. Keisha Washington pushed the door open, her nurse's shoes muddy after a long night shift. Her shoulders sagged with fatigue, but her eyes brightened when she saw her son still awake. "Jamal, oh my God, it's nearly midnight," she said, her voice a mix of concern and gentleness. She set her purse down, the scent of hospital coffee still lingering. "You need to sleep tomorrow's school." Jamal looked up, offering a tired but determined smile. "I'm almost done, Mom. This is more than just an assignment." Keisha gazed into her son's eyes and recognized the fire she had seen when he was younger, when he'd sit for hours in the public library, fiddling with code on old computers no one else used. She sighed and pulled a chair next to him. "You remind me of myself back then, stubborn and unwilling to give up. But don't let it wear you out, okay?" Jamal nodded, but his mind had already returned to the screen. He was outlining Reflector, machine intelligence bias, reflection and equity response. An AI system capable of analyzing educational data to reveal hidden biases. The idea had come from long nights reading open-source materials on machine learning, from witnessing his mother being mistreated at the hospital simply because she was a black nurse, and from his own experiences at Evergreen, where his presence was always questioned. Reflector wouldn't just be a project, it would be a mirror reflecting the truth that people like Bennett deliberately ignored. Suddenly, Jamal's phone lit up with an anonymous message from an unfamiliar number. "Don't think you belong at Evergreen Scholarship. Back off before it's too late." His heart pounded, a cold shiver running down his spine. Someone at the school, maybe Ethan Bennett or one of his wealthy friends, was trying to intimidate him. Jamal clenched his fist, anger rising. He considered showing the message to Miss Elena Ramirez, his English teacher and scholarship advisor. That morning he quietly handed her the phone in her small office decorated with posters about equality and Toni Morrison books. Ms. Ramirez furrowed her brows as she read the message, her eyes showing clear outrage, but also caution. "Jamal, keep this quiet," she whispered. "If it gets out now, the school board might make you a target. Focus on your assignment and let me handle the rest." Jamal nodded, but inside doubt crept in. Was she afraid of confronting powerful families like the Bennetts, or did she genuinely want to protect him? Back in the apartment, Jamal pushed the message out of his mind and focused on Reflector. He had written a preliminary algorithm using multiple AI models to compare data from different sources, some trained on traditional textbooks, others on more diverse historical materials. His idea was to have these models argue with each other, thereby highlighting the blind spots in how education was presented. But his laptop kept crashing and the fan roared louder than ever. Every time the screen went black, Jamal's heart seemed to stop. He couldn't lose this data, not after everything he had invested. He quickly saved the code to 3 different cloud services, a habit born from painful past experiences with lost data. While waiting for the laptop to restart, Jamal silently scanned the room. Posters of Mark Dean and Katherine Johnson, black pioneers in technology he admired, were stuck to the walls next to overdue library books he couldn't afford to replace. They reminded him that he was not alone, that people like him had overcome barriers that seemed insurmountable. But then another memory flooded back, sharp and painful. When he was 10, Jamal had built a simple neural network to predict his mother's shifts based on public data from the hospital. It was the first time he felt he could change the world, even if just a small corner of it. When he showed his mother, Keisha hugged him tightly, tears rolling down her face. "You're my pride, Jamal," she said. But that joy was quickly crushed when a teacher at his old public school mocked him. "Boy, you think you're a genius, that's just a toy." Those words burned into Jamal's mind, but instead of making him falter, they fueled a more persistent fire. The phone vibrated, cutting through his thoughts. A message from Alex Chen. "Yo, Jamal, don't let old Bennett get you down. We know you're good." Jamal smiled, warmth creeping in between the exhaustion. Alex was one of the few at Evergreen who didn't look at him with disdain, but even Alex didn't truly understand what he was up against. Jamal typed back, "Thanks, bro, I'm good." But he wasn't. He felt like he was standing on the edge on one side, the dream of changing the world on the other, the doubt and hostility from those who didn't want him to succeed. By the time the clock struck 1 a.m., Jamal had finally finished a preliminary version of Reflector. He ran it on a section of Evergreen's history textbook, and the results appeared on the screen, making him almost stop breathing. The AI models revealed that the chapter on the Industrial Revolution only mentioned 5 white inventors, while omitting 17 others, including women and people of color, whose contributions were equal to or greater. "This is it," Jamal whispered, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. This wasn't just an assignment, this was a weapon, a way to force Evergreen to face itself. He saved his work, shut down the laptop, and leaned back in his chair. Through the small window, the lights of Chicago flickered like distant stars. Jamal knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Bennett wouldn't accept this easily, and the anonymous message was just the beginning. But in this moment he felt a new strength, the power of truth, of code, and of himself. "They'll see," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the darkness. "They'll all see." The light from the large windows in the computer science classroom at Evergreen Prep Academy seemed colder than usual despite the bright sun outside. Today marked the 3rd day since Professor Harold Bennett assigned the task to prove the limits of artificial intelligence, and the atmosphere in the classroom was heavy like a storm about to break. The students' brand new MacBooks gleamed on the tables, but Jamal Washington's old ThinkPad with a piece of tape holding the corner of the screen in place became the focal point of curious and contemptuous glances. Jamal sat in the back corner as usual, trying to shrink into himself, but his hands gripped the edge of the desk, hiding the tremor of anger and anxiety. Professor Bennett stood in front of the class, his grey suit crisply ironed, his neatly trimmed moustache twitching as he began his lecture. "Today we will examine some excellent examples from my former students at prestigious schools," he announced, his voice booming with authority. He activated the projector and the large screen displayed flawlessly designed presentations, AI projects from students with names that evoked wealth and privilege, names like Charles Wentworth and Emily Harrington. Each slide was a reminder of the distance between Jamal and the rest of the class. The other students nodded, some whispering to each other, confident they would create something similar. But Jamal felt Bennett's gaze slide over him sharp as a blade, as if he were saying, "You don't belong here." Inside Jamal, a wave of emotion surged. He recalled the long nights in the small apartment when his mother Keisha came home from her night shift with bloodshot eyes from exhaustion. He remembered the times he had to teach himself from free online resources because his family couldn't afford the online courses his classmates considered commonplace. Every line of code he wrote was a battle not just with the computer, but with a world that seemed determined to push him down. But today, as Bennett boasted about the elite students from the past, a spark of rebellion flickered in Jamal's mind. He raised his hand, his voice ringing clear despite his pounding heart. "Professor, I've studied AI ethics and bias detection. Could I create a program to demonstrate AI's limits in identifying and correcting social biases? The class fell silent. Eyes turned toward Jamal, some surprised, others filled with mockery. Ethan Bennett, sitting in the front row with his smug smile, burst out laughing. Bias detection program, why don't you have AI write a rap, Jamal? Maybe that's more your speed. A few other students laughed along, the sound piercing through Jamal's chest like arrows. His face flushed, but he kept his eyes fixed on Bennett, waiting for a response. The professor stood still, his mustache twitching, a sign Jamal had learned to recognize as a sign of displeasure. That's a rather ambitious idea, Mr. Washington. Bennett said, his tone darkening, laced with subtle sarcasm. Are you sure you understand what bias detection is? It's a bit beyond your current capabilities. The words landed like a slap. Jamal felt his chest tighten, but he did not back down. Professor AI bias occurs when algorithms produce biased results due to training data or the programmers themselves. I think analyzing bias in education would fit the assignment. He spoke slowly, trying to keep his voice calm even though a storm raged inside. Bennett walked over to Jamal's desk, his shadow falling over Jamal's worn notebook. Enough, he cut him off, his face slightly reddening. I don't need a lecture from Wikipedia. If you truly understood this concept, you would know it goes beyond the scope of this assignment and frankly beyond your capabilities. He paused, his sharp gaze locking onto Jamal. Focus on something simpler, like using AI to solve a basic problem. That would be a good lesson for you. Ethan burst out laughing, his voice echoing, Yeah, Jamal, just do a math problem, don't overdo it. A few other students snickered, but Alex Chen, sitting 2 desks away from Jamal, shook his head with a disapproving look. Jamal felt the temperature in the room rise, his face burning. He wanted to shout that he had built neural networks since he was 10, that he had self-taught everything from free resources, while his classmates had private tutors and expensive tech camps, but he held back, his eyes falling to the laptop screen where Reflector's code was slowly taking shape. He reminded himself, they'll see, not through words but through actions. And after class, as the students packed up, Jamal slowly saved his notes to the cloud, careful as always, because his old laptop could crash at any moment. Alex passed by, whispering, Bennett's awful, Jamal. Don't let him get to you. Jamal nodded, but didn't reply. He didn't want to be overheard criticizing the professor, not out of fear, but because he knew he needed to save his strength for the real battle. But when he left the class, a new incident made his heart tighten. When checking his laptop, he found the keyboard sticky, as if someone had deliberately spilled water on it. He looked around, his gaze meeting Ethan, and 2 of his friends laughing softly in the corner of the room. Jamal clenched his fist, but there was no proof. All he could do was take the laptop home, wipe it clean, and pray it still worked. At home, Jamal sat in the corner of the living room, the laptop on his lap. Keisha was preparing dinner, the smell of stew filling the air, but she noticed the tension on her son's face. Jamal, what's wrong? She asked, setting down the knife. He recounted what happened in class, his voice shaking when he mentioned Bennett's words and the anonymous message. Keisha sighed, her eyes a mix of anger and helplessness. At the hospital I've heard similar things, she said. Once a doctor told me that nurses like me should just do simple tasks, but I'm still here, still doing my job well. You are the same, Jamal. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Her words were like a wind that stoked the fire within him. Jamal nodded, opened his laptop, and began to work. But then a new problem emerged. When checking Reflector, Jamal found a piece of code corrupted, not his mistake, but as if someone had tried to access his computer remotely through the school network. His heart raced. Was Ethan and his friends trying to sabotage him, or was it someone else? He quickly added a simple encryption layer to protect the data, but this incident made him realize Reflector wasn't just a project, it was becoming a threat to those who wanted to maintain the status quo. The laptop screen lit up, displaying preliminary results and analysis of Evergreen's history textbooks, revealing clear bias in how inventors were presented. Jamal smiled despite his exhaustion. This was just the beginning. He wouldn't just finish the assignment, he would force Evergreen to confront the hidden ghosts within their own system. The small apartment of the Washington family was submerged in darkness, with only the faint blue light from Jamal Washington's old ThinkPad illuminating his face. The whirring sound of the fan was like an ancient beast struggling to survive another night. It was nearly 3 a.m. and the numbers on the digital clock beside the bed seemed to mock him. Jamal sat on the old wooden chair at the kitchen table, his back aching from the hunched position, eyes stinging from lack of sleep. but he couldn't stop. Reflector machine. Intelligence bias. Reflection and equity response. The project he had poured his heart and soul into was on the verge of a breakthrough. He could feel it like a climber spotting the summit through the mist, but every step forward came with a new risk. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of police sirens, the familiar soundtrack of Southside Chicago. His mother Keisha had gone to her night shift, leaving a plate of food in the microwave and a scribbled note, "Eat dinner, son. Don't stay up too late." But Jamal couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He was battling something far bigger than Professor Harold Bennett's assignment. He was battling the very prejudices that had tried to hold him back all his life. Every line of code he wrote was a declaration: I belong here. I'm better than what you think. On the screen, the terminal window was filled with red error messages. Reflector had crashed for the 15th time that night, and each time Jamal's heart sank. He knew this laptop wasn't powerful enough to handle the computational load that Reflector demanded. It wasn't designed for projects like this. But he had no other choice. He saved his work to 3 different cloud services, a habit born from painful past experiences with lost data. "Come on," he whispered to himself, his fingers moving across the keyboard with the precision of a musician playing a favorite symphony. He corrected a function in the code, adjusting a parameter in the algorithm that compared AI models. Reflector wasn't just running a single AI model, it forced multiple models to debate each other, comparing how they interpreted the same data, highlighting hidden biases. Suddenly, a notification popped up on the screen. Unauthorized access from external network. Jamal's heart pounded. Someone was trying to break into his system. He checked the network log and saw that a strange IP address had tried to connect to his laptop through the school's Wi-Fi network accessed through his student account. "Ethan," he muttered, immediately suspecting Professor Bennett's son. Ethan and his wealthy friends had mocked Jamal from day one, and after the water incident with the keyboard the day before, Jamal couldn't rule out the possibility that they were trying to sabotage him. But there was no evidence, and Jamal couldn't let himself be distracted. He quickly added an AES-256 encryption layer to Reflector's data, while blocking the suspicious IP address. "If you want to play this game, you've picked the wrong opponent," he whispered, his eyes flashing with determination. Fatigue washed over him, but then a memory suddenly surfaced, as clear as a slow-motion film. When Jamal was 10, he had sat in the Southside Public Library, on a broken plastic chair in front of a sluggish public computer. He had built his first neural network, a simple program that predicted his mother's work shifts based on public data from the hospital. He remembered the thrill when the program ran successfully for the first time, and how his mother hugged him tightly when he showed her the results. "You are my light," Keisha had said, tears streaming down her face. But that memory also carried pain when a teacher at his old school mocked him when he shared the project, saying, "Things like this aren't for you." Those words had left a scar, reminding Jamal that the world was always ready to doubt him, not because of his abilities, but because of his skin color and background. He shook his head, pushing the memory away, and turned back to Reflector. After hours of struggle, he made a breakthrough. By combining multiple AI models, some trained on traditional educational data, others on more diverse sources from minority communities, Reflector could self-check. It didn't just detect bias. It explained why, showing how the training data influenced the results. Jamal tested it by inputting a passage from Evergreen's history textbook, the chapter on the Industrial Revolution. The results that appeared made him almost stop breathing. The traditional model praised 5 white inventors, while the diverse model revealed 17 other inventors, including women, black people, and indigenous people, who were overlooked despite their equally significant contributions. "I did it," Jamal whispered, his heart racing with excitement and fear. This wasn't just a project, this was a weapon, a mirror reflecting truths that Evergreen had deliberately concealed. His phone buzzed a message from Alex Chen. "Yo, Jamal, you okay? Heard your laptop broke." Jamal smiled wearily. Alex was one of the few people at Evergreen who treated him like a human, not just a scholarship student. He typed back, "I'm good, still working, thanks man." But then another message came, this time from Sophia Ramirez Ms. Ramirez's sister, a sharp-eyed girl with jet-black hair who was in the same class. "Jamal Elena asked me to send you some bias detection materials. Check your email." Jamal opened his inbox and found a PDF from Sophia, a research paper on how AI can be manipulated by biased data. He felt a warm glow amidst his exhaustion. Maybe he wasn't completely alone, but then the laptop crashed again, the screen going black. Jamal almost shouted in frustration, but he took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He restarted the machine, checked the backup, and luckily no data was lost. When the screen lit up again, he continued working, adding a visualization layer, so Reflector could display bias in real time. He imagined the presentation day when the whole class and Bennett would have to face the truth, but deep down he was afraid. What if Bennett dismissed the project? What if he called it fraud or copied from the internet? Jamal knew he had to make everything perfect, leaving no room for doubt. The front door creaked open and Keisha walked in still in her nurse uniform, her tired face brightening when she saw her son. "Jamal, you're still up?" she asked, her voice full of concern. He nodded, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Mom, I'm almost done. I have to finish." Keisha approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know you want to prove yourself, but you're also my treasure. Don't let them take your health away." Her words were like a cool breeze soothing the anger inside Jamal. He looked at her, seeing the lines on her forehead, the result of years of relentless work. "I'll be careful, Mum," he promised, knowing full well that he wouldn't stop. By 4:30 a.m., Reflector was finally running smoothly. Jamal inputted another dataset, the lectures from Bennett's online portal, and the results appeared as a shock. Reflector revealed that Bennett called on male students 73% more than female students and frequently corrected correct answers from minority students as if they were wrong. Jamal sat still, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a project, this was an accusation, undeniable proof. He saved everything, closed the laptop, and leaned back in his chair. Through the window, the dawn began to break, colouring the Chicago sky with a soft orange hue. Jamal smiled, though his eyes were heavy. He was ready to face Bennett, Evergreen, and the world. But deep down, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The hidden ghosts in the system had been exposed, and now they would fight back. Friday arrived at Evergreen Prep Academy with an unusually warm breeze of spring, but inside the computer science classroom, the air was as cold as ice. The students' shiny MacBooks were neatly arranged on the desks, the light from the screens reflecting on youthful faces, some eager, some indifferent. Jamal Washington sat at the back corner, his old ThinkPad with the corner of the screen taped together, looking like a wounded warrior among the gleaming technology. He hadn't slept much in the past 3 days, his eyes bloodshot, but in his chest a fire of determination burned bright. Today wasn't just the day to present Professor Harold Bennett's assignment. Today was the day Jamal would make the whole class, the whole school, and perhaps even the world see him in a different light. Professor Bennett stood at the front of the class, his grey suit impeccably ironed, his neatly trimmed moustache twitching as he scanned the student list. "Who wants to go first?" he asked. His tone laced with a hint of arrogance, as if he already knew the outcome. The trivial projects would only reaffirm his belief that AI couldn't match human intellect, especially the intellect of his elite students whom he favoured. Ethan Bennett, his son, raised his hand immediately, his ever-present confident smile on his face. "I'll go first, Professor," he said, emphasising the word professor with a teasing undertone. Ethan presented a conversation with ChatGPT proving that AI couldn't write original poetry. The AI-generated verses were repetitive, devoid of emotion, and the class clapped politely. Next was Sarah Nguyen, a girl with her hair tied up, presenting on how AI-generated images could never perfectly recreate human artistic styles. Another polite round of applause followed. Jamal watched his heart pounding. Each presentation was a reminder of the gap between him and his classmates. Their projects were safe, simple, just as Bennett expected surface-level critiques of AI, without delving into the real issues. But Reflector, machine intelligence, bias, reflection and equity response was no ordinary assignment. It was a mirror ready to reflect the truths Evergreen had tried to hide. He clenched his hands under the desk, trying to suppress the tremor of anxiety mixed with excitement. He had prepared meticulously, but the memory of Bennett's mocking words. "Some students aren't built for advanced technology," still felt like a knife wound to his self-esteem. After 7 presentations, Bennett's voice rang out cold and laced with sarcasm. "Mr. Washington," he called, his gaze locking onto Jamal. "I believe it's your turn. Have you finished the assignment, or are you struggling with your limitations?" Snickers echoed from a few students, with Ethan leading the charge with a smug grin. Jamal stood up slowly, carrying his old laptop to the front of the class. The laughter quieted as he plugged the HDMI cable into the projector, the large screen lighting up with Reflector's interface, clean professional, nothing like the toy Bennett had suggested. Jamal took a deep breath, his voice clear, even as his heart raced. "Professor classmates, I have created Reflector, Machine Intelligence, Bias, Reflection and Equity Response. It doesn't just prove the limits of AI, it exposes the limits of ourselves." Bennett raised an eyebrow, his mocking smile evident. "An ambitious name, Mr. Washington. I hope your program lives up to it." Jamal didn't respond, simply clicking to the first slide. Reflector uses multiple AI models to analyze educational content looking for bias, misinformation, and excluded perspectives. To illustrate, I've analyzed Chapter 12 from Evergreen's history textbook on the Industrial Revolution. He entered a passage from the textbook and Reflector's interface began working the screen, splitting into sections, each showing analysis from different AI models. In a few seconds, the results appeared. As you can see, Jamal continued, his voice growing more confident. The AI model trained on traditional educational data found no issues with this passage. But the model trained on diverse historical sources found a problem. The passage only mentions 5 white inventors, while ignoring 17 other inventors from the same period, including women and people of color, whose contributions were equally or more significant. He clicked to highlight the results. Guess which group those 17 overlooked inventors belonged to? The class fell silent. Even Ethan stopped laughing, his gaze flickering between surprise and discomfort. Bennett stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're implying that our textbooks are biased based on a program you made yourself." Jamal remained calm, even as his heart raced to the point he feared it would burst. "I'm not implying anything, Professor. Reflector just displays the data patterns. But if you'd like, I can show you something more interesting." He clicked to a new slide and the air in the room became heavier. "I've entered the recordings of your last 20 lessons, which are publicly stored on the school's online portal. Reflector detected some patterns." He paused, his gaze locking with Bennett's. "You call on male students 73% more than female students. When you call on female students, you tend to reinterpret their correct answers as if they were wrong at a rate of 61%. For minority students, that number increases to 84%. Whispers filled the room. Alex Chen, sitting in the middle, slyly pulled out his phone and started recording a video. Sophia Ramirez Miss. Ramirez's younger sister covered her mouth in shock, her eyes sparkling with admiration, mixed with fear. Ethan whispered something to his friend beside him, but his voice lacked the usual confidence. Bennett moved closer to the projector, his face as red as if it were about to explode. "What are you doing? This isn't an assignment. You're attacking me, attacking this school." He reached for Jamal's laptop as if trying to disconnect it. But Jamal had prepared for this moment. He pressed a key and a notification popped up on the screen. "The project has been submitted to the school board's digital portal 3 minutes ago with a timestamp confirmation." He looked directly at Bennett, his voice calm but sharp. "Professor, would you like me to continue the presentation, or should we discuss why you're trying to prevent a student's presentation?" Bennett froze, his hands suspended in mid-air. The class held its breath, no one daring to move. Suddenly the door opened. Ms. Elena Ramirez appeared in the doorway, her gaze cold as she looked at Bennett. "Is everything all right, Professor?" she asked, her tone both polite and challenging. Bennett stepped back, grinding his teeth. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. Mr. Washington just finished his presentation. Jamal looked around the room, seeing eyes that for the first time truly looked at him not with disdain or pity, but with curiosity, even respect. "The real limit isn't in AI or human intelligence," he said, his voice echoing clearly in the silence. "It lies in our willingness to face our own biases. AI is just a mirror. The question is, do we have the courage to look into it?" He closed the laptop and walked back to his seat as slow clapping started from Alex. Then Sophia joined in and a few other students followed. The clapping spread through not everyone participated. Ethan sat still, his face pale, while Bennett stood motionless, his gaze shattered. But outside the window, Jamal didn't know that Alex had posted the video on Instagram with the hashtag #EvergreenBias. Within minutes, the video began to spread and a social media storm was brewing, one that neither Evergreen nor Bennett could foresee. In that moment, Jamal felt a spark of victory, but also a new fear. He had opened the door to the truth and now there was no turning back. He looked out into the hallway where display cabinets filled with gleaming trophies stood and told himself, this is just the beginning. The boardroom at Evergreen Prep Academy was steeped in a suffocating silence broken only by the clicking of the red pen in Principal Victoria Langford's hand. The polished oak walls and the massive conference table seemed to close in, weighing down on Jamal Washington as he sat in the stiff leather chair beside his mother Keisha, who still wore her nurse's uniform stained from an emergency shift. Across from them, Langford, with her tightly pinned silver hair and cold steely eyes, stared at the computer screen, where Jamal's presentation reflector still displayed the stark figures of bias within Evergreen's educational system. Professor Harold Bennett stood behind, pacing like a trapped animal, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is a serious violation of academic integrity," Langford began, her voice cold as winter ice. "Unauthorized access to the school's system, manipulation of proprietary data, and possibly plagiarism of source code that exceeds the capability of a 12-year-old student." Her accusations were like a blade cutting straight into Jamal's pride. His chest tightened, his breath becoming laboured. He had known his presentation would shock, but he hadn't expected it to lead to an interrogation like this. He glanced at Keisha, seeing her hands tightly clasped in her lap, her eyes burning with the protective fire of a mother ready to fight for her son. "My son has done nothing wrong," Keisha said, her voice firm despite the fatigue in it. "He completed his assignment, and if that makes someone uncomfortable, the problem lies not with Jamal." She emphasized his name as if to make it clear that he was not just a scholarship student, he was Jamal Washington, a person, a genius. Bennett scoffed, walking toward the table. "Mrs. Washington, he claims to have built a system that even PhD candidates struggle with. Either he's lying or he's been assisted. Either way, it's academic fraud." Jamal felt his face flush, but he kept silent, his eyes locked on Langford. He knew that any words spoken now could be twisted, used against him. But then the door to the room opened and Ms. Elena Ramirez stepped in, followed by Mr. Jonathan Park, the head of Evergreen's IT department, a calm man of Korean descent whose demeanour was an anomaly in the midst of this academic battle. "Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Langford," Park said, holding up a tablet. "I've reviewed the metadata from Mr. Washington's submission. The commit logs show continuous development over 72 hours, all from the same IP address, his home network. The typing pattern matches his previous assignments. More importantly, the school system logs show that he only accessed public data from the online portal. There's nothing proprietary about it." Bennett turned red, his voice rising. "He could have forged the timestamps that proves nothing." Park shook his head, a faint smile appearing on his lips. "Actually, he couldn't. Our system uses blockchain verification. Tampering is impossible." Langford raised an eyebrow, her gaze flickering between doubt and unease. "That still doesn't prove he wrote the source code himself," she said coldly. Ms. Ramirez stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Then let him prove it. Let's issue a new challenge right now under supervision. If Jamal can create a similar system, you'll have to retract your accusations." Bennett let out a derisive laugh. "A waste of time. Even if he can write something basic, it doesn't prove he made Reflector." But Keisha stood up, her hands trembling with anger. "Professor Bennett, what are you afraid of? Afraid my son is actually brilliant? Or afraid that a black boy from Southside could be smarter than you want to believe?" Her words were like a bullet silencing the room. Langford cleared her throat, her eyes shifting between Bennett and Jamal. "All right, Mr. Park, can you set up a supervised environment?" "It's ready," Park said calmly, his eyes glimmering with admiration. "I anticipated this. Computer Lab 3 has been prepared, a clean machine, no internet access except for basic reference pages. We can project his screen here." Bennett looked cornered, but he didn't object further. Jamal stood up, feeling his mother's gaze warm, steady on his back. "I can do this, Mum," he whispered. Keisha gently squeezed his shoulder. "I know, baby." As Jamal entered Lab 3, he could feel the eyes of dozens watching through the glass, students, teachers, and even a few parents who had heard the rumours through Evergreen's gossip network. Alex Chen stood outside, giving him a thumbs up, while Sophia Ramirez, with a worried look, peeked at him from afar. Ethan Bennett stood near the door, his gaze shifting between hostility and doubt. Jamal sat down before a brand new computer, his heart pounding. Park handed him a USB drive. "These are the anonymized admission essays from the past 5 years. Build a program to analyze the acceptance and rejection patterns." Langford's voice was cold as she spoke. "You have 2 hours, Mr. Washington. Start." Jamal took a deep breath, his fingers touching the keyboard. For the first time since coming to Evergreen, he didn't shrink back, didn't try to make himself smaller. He allowed himself to be who he was, a programmer, an innovator, a person who had spent thousands of hours self-teaching to overcome barriers that his classmates would never face. The screen lit up and he began typing each line of code like a brushstroke in a poem. He named the new program Prism, pattern recognition, in systemic markers, a simplified yet sharp version of a reflector designed to analyze the essays with ruthless efficiency. In the meeting room, the large screen projected each key Jamal typed. Bennett muttered impossible as Jamal built a neural network from scratch, not using standard libraries, but writing his own functions, each one optimized with a creativity that even Park couldn't help but admire. He's not using standard libraries, Park whispered, his voice full of admiration. He's writing everything from scratch. Bennett shook his head, his face paling. He's definitely seen this data before. He prepared for this challenge. Langford replied coolly, I selected this data randomly from the archive 5 minutes before the challenge began, unless you think Mr. Washington has psychic abilities. Through the glass, Jamal could feel Bennett's gaze like a predator waiting for him to fail. But he didn't look back. He focused on the screen where Prism began to show results. Essays mentioning summer in the Hamptons or skiing in Aspen had an 82% acceptance rate, while those about summer jobs or helping pay family bills only had a 31% acceptance rate, even when the academic content was superior. With 30 minutes left, Jamal did something unexpected. He turned to the glass door where the crowd was growing and spoke through the intercom. Ms. Langford, I'd like to add a prediction model to forecast which essays this year will be accepted based on the patterns I've found. May I do that? Langford hesitated, then nodded. Jamal turned back, his fingers flying across the keyboard. In 10 minutes, he built a prediction model with 91% accuracy matching the preliminary admissions decisions which Park confirmed. The crowd outside murmured, some parents looking uneasy, realizing that their children's acceptance might not be based on talent. Bennett shouted, "This proves nothing," but Jamal interrupted, his voice calm yet sharp. "Professor, do you want me to add the feature you suggested in the email to the admissions committee about filtering applications faster?" Bennett went pale. What email? Jamal opened a new function. The email you sent to all department heads suggesting using AI to filter for cultural fit. I've implemented your parameters. He ran the function, and the results appeared. Bennett's filter would eliminate 94% of applications from minority students and 87% of scholarship students before any human review. The lab was silent except for the sound of Jamal's keystrokes. He stood up, looking directly at Bennett. "You asked me to prove I wrote Reflector. I just rebuilt its core functionality in 2 hours with tougher limitations. You said students like me don't belong in advanced technology, but the only limit here is that you can't see talent when it doesn't look like you." The door swung open. Alex Chen rushed in, still filming. "Jamal, your video's going viral, 30,000 views already." Tech Twitter is freaking out. Langford's phone, then Bennett's, and then everyone in the room started buzzing as the video spread with the hashtag Evergreen Bias. Jamal looked out through the glass, seeing his mother standing there, tears of pride streaming down her face. He had won, but he knew this was just the beginning of a bigger battle. The light from the small apartment's window in the Washington family's South Side Chicago home flickered through the thin curtains, casting a glow on Jamal Washington's tired but radiant face. It had been 3 days since his presentation at Evergreen Prep Academy, and the world seemed to have changed overnight. His old ThinkPad, now sitting on the kitchen table like a trophy, still buzzed as he checked his email. The screen lit up with dozens of notifications from news outlets, researchers, and even an invitation from MIT to present Reflector, the AI project that had rocked Evergreen and sparked a national debate. But alongside the praise, another storm was brewing, and Jamal felt its weight with each new message. Keisha Washington walked into the room, still wearing her nurse's uniform, her eyes red from exhaustion but shining with pride. "Jamal, look at this," she said, holding up her phone. An article from the Chicago Tribune appeared on the screen with the headline, "12-year-old exposes bias at prestigious school using self-made AI." Below it was a photo of Jamal in the lab, hands gliding over the keyboard during the proving challenge. "I never thought my son would make it to such a big newspaper," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Jamal smiled, but the smile faded as he opened Twitter, rather X on his phone. The hashtag #EvergreenBias had over 1 million mentions, but not all were supportive. Alongside the praise were cruel comments. Just a kid wanting to be famous. He definitely hacked the system, and worse, racial slurs that he tried to scroll past, but they still felt like daggers in his heart. Jamal closed the app, his heart heavy. He had prepared for backlash from Professor Harold Bennett and the school board, but he hadn't expected the world to turn against him. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Keisha asked, sensing her son's unusual silence. Jamal nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I just didn't think it would go this far, Mum. I just wanted to do the assignment." Keisha sat next to him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You've done more than that, Jamal. You've forced them to face the truth. But I know the truth is never comfortable for those who want to hide it." He opened his laptop, trying to focus on improving Reflector. An email from Dr. Nia Ellis, an AI researcher at MIT, made him stop breathing. "Mr. Washington." The email read, "I watched your presentation video. Reflector is a breakthrough. I would like to invite you to MIT to discuss integrating your tool into our research on AI. Fairness." Jamal read the email 3 times, his heart racing. MIT, the place he had only dared dream of when secretly reading scientific papers at the Southside Public Library. But that joy was quickly dampened by another email anonymous from a disposable address. "Stop now, troublemaker. You have no idea what you're causing." The threat sent a chill down his spine, reminding him of the previous hack. He quickly forwarded the email to Mr. Jonathan Park, the head of Evergreen's IT department, who had promised to investigate. Meanwhile, at the hospital where Keisha worked, the storm was brewing there as well. A colleague, the head doctor, had openly criticised her in the break room, calling her the mother of the troublemaker and implying that she shouldn't be proud of the controversial stuff. Keisha told Jamal about it at dinner, her voice calm, but her eyes revealing the hurt. "They think I'm not good enough to work there just because I support you," she said. Jamal clenched his fists, anger rising. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to suffer because of me." Keisha shook her head, her eyes steadfast. "Don't apologise, Jamal. I'd rather endure this than have you stay silent. But tomorrow I'm meeting with the hospital director. If they want to fire me, they'll have to give a good reason." Her words, though strong, placed a new weight on Jamal. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his mother too. The next morning, when Jamal arrived at school, he found that the hallway had changed. The looks that once held disdain were now mixed with curiosity and respect. Alex Chen ran up to him, phone in hand. "Jamal, you have to see this." He opened Instagram, where Ethan Bennett, who had once mocked Jamal relentlessly, had just posted a public apology. "I was wrong to ridicule Jamal Washington." The post began, "I didn't understand what he was up against, and I contributed to the problem. I'm learning how to do better." The post had over 5,000 likes, but the comments were a battlefield. Half supported Ethan, while the other half called him fake. Jamal looked at the post, his emotions mixed. Part of him wanted to believe Ethan was changing, but another part doubted his motives. Was this just a way to salvage the Bennett family's reputation? In the computer lab, Miss Elena Ramirez pulled Jamal aside. "Jamal, the school board is meeting this afternoon to review Reflector," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Some members want to ban your tool, saying it's disruptive. But Mr. Park and I are fighting for you to present to them." Jamal nodded, feeling the pressure mounting. "Ms. Ramirez." "I don't want to cause trouble. I just want things to be fairer." She sampled her gaze warm. "You're not causing trouble, Jamal. You're creating an opportunity to fix things. But you need to prepare because they won't accept it easily." At the same time, the media storm continued to grow. A reporter from CNN contacted him wanting to interview Jamal live on television. He declined not out of fear, but because he wanted to focus on defending Reflector. But the video of his presentation posted by Alex on X had surpassed 2 million views. Technology commentators around the world began analysing Reflector, calling it a breakthrough in AI fairness. But the negative comments were growing sharper, with some calling Jamal an opportunist, or worse, sending racist threats directly to his inbox. Each message was like a knife, making him wonder if he had the strength to keep going. At home, Jamal sat before his laptop trying to improve Reflector's security after the previous hack. He added end-to-end encryption and a real-time alert system for unauthorized access. But every time he opened X, the hateful comments flooded in. "Who do you think you are, kid?" one anonymous account wrote. "Go back to Southside." Jamal closed his laptop, feeling the weight on his chest. He remembered his mother's words. The truth is never comfortable for those who want to hide it. But this truth was wearing him down. That night an unexpected message came from Sophia Ramirez. "Jamal, don't let those comments get to you. You're doing something the world needs to see." He smiled, warmth creeping in amid his exhaustion. Sophia, though just a classmate, had become an unexpected ally, and her encouragement reminded him that not everyone was against him. He typed back, "Thanks, Sophia. I won't give up." At midnight, Jamal received another email from Dr. Naya Ellis, along with a research paper on how to integrate Reflector into global educational systems. "Mr. Washington, your work has the potential to change how we teach," she wrote. "Come to MIT. We need people like you." Jamal looked at the email, his heart pounding. But he knew before thinking of MIT, he had to face the school board tomorrow. He looked out the window where the lights of Chicago flickered like distant stars. "Mum was right," he whispered. "The truth isn't easy, but it's worth fighting for." 3 weeks after the fateful meeting with the Evergreen Prep Academy board, the atmosphere at the school had changed like a city just after a storm. The marble hallways, which once sparkled with the arrogance of privilege, now carried a sense of unease mixed with hope. News about Reflector Jamal Washington's AI project had spread throughout Chicago and beyond, with over 700 schools worldwide downloading the tool to analyze bias in their curricula. The hashtag #EvergreenBias still dominated X, but each share was a reminder that Jamal's victory came at a cost. He sat in the school library, his old ThinkPad open before him, his eyes tired yet resolute. He was preparing for an opportunity bigger than anything he had ever imagined, an international AI conference at MIT, where he had been invited to present alongside Dr. Naya Ellis. But Jamal's mind wasn't solely on MIT. He felt the weight of the changes he'd started. Professor Harold Bennett had officially resigned, and 3 other teachers whose biased behaviors had been exposed by Reflector also left quietly. The school board had launched the Washington Innovation Scholarship, but not everyone was pleased. A group of wealthy parents led by Richard Grayson had held secret meetings demanding the scholarship be revoked and Reflector usage restricted, claiming it damaged Evergreen's reputation. Rumors spread that they were organizing to sue Jamal for disruption. Each whisper was like a needle to his confidence, making him wonder if he had inadvertently opened a door leading to more trouble than solutions. In the library, Alex Chen sat across from Jamal, scrolling through his phone with a mischievous grin. "Jamal, check this out." A school in London just used Reflector and found their textbooks ignored 80% of women's contributions to science. He showed Jamal the post from a British teacher on X. Jamal smiled, but the smile faded when he remembered an anonymous email he had received that morning. "You think you're a hero? You're just a kid destroying your own future." He hadn't told anyone, not even his mother, because he didn't want to worry her. Keisha had enough drama at the hospital where she had suddenly been promoted to head nurse, after the director recognized she was being mistreated because of Jamal's reputation. But the promotion also came with jealous stares from colleagues, making her work twice as hard to prove herself. Jamal closed his laptop, stood up, and looked out the window. Across the evergreen garden, he saw Sophia Ramirez walking with Ms. Elena Ramirez, the 2 of them engaged in animated conversation. Sophia had become an unexpected ally, often sending him AI research papers and encouraging him through messages. He appreciated her, but loneliness still lingered in his heart. He felt like he was standing on a cliff with the whole world watching, waiting for him to fail. The memories of those nights in the Southside Public Library flooded back the long hours teaching himself to code on old computers, hoping that one day he could change his life and his mother's. "I've come this far," he whispered, clenching his fists. "I can't stop now." The opportunity to keep fighting came over the weekend when Jamal organised a free coding workshop for kids from underprivileged areas in Southside, sponsored by Dr. Lorraine Hayes, an Evergreen alum. He named the program Code Your Truth, aiming to help kids like him find power through technology. But the workshop didn't go smoothly. A group of Evergreen alumni parents, led by someone who had once supported Grayson, appeared outside the community centre holding signs protesting "Stop Jamal Washington" and "AI is not the truth." They accused him of political propaganda and damaging the reputation of education. Jamal stood behind the community centre's glass, watching the crowd, his heart pounding. "They hate me because I'm telling the truth," he whispered to Alex, who had volunteered to help with the workshop. But then something unexpected happened. Ethan Bennett, who had once been Jamal's bitter enemy, appeared with a group of Evergreen classmates. He stepped forward to the protesters, raising his hand for silence. I was wrong about Jamal." Ethan said, his voice trembling but resolute. I mocked him, thinking he didn't deserve it. But Reflector opened my eyes. "If you want to stop him, you're stopping the truth." The crowd fell silent, some people stepping back. Ethan turned to Jamal, his eyes sincere. "I owe you a real apology, not just on Instagram. I want to help." Jamal looked at him, his emotions mixed. Part of him wanted to believe Ethan, but part of him still remembered the mockery in class. "Thanks," he said, his voice cautious, "but actions speak louder than words." The workshop continued, and the kids from ages 10 to 14 with bright eyes made Jamal forget the protesters. He taught them how to write basic Python programs, watching them laugh out loud when they saw their first pieces of code run. A little girl, Maya, with neatly braided hair, raised her hand. "Jamal, can I make something like Reflector?" she asked. Jamal smiled, his heart warmed. "You can do anything, Maya, as long as you don't give up." That moment reminded Jamal of why he started, not just to prove himself, but to pave the way for others. That night at the apartment, Keisha hugged Jamal tightly, her eyes sparkling with tears. "I watched your workshop video on X," she said. "You make me so proud, Jamal." He told his mother about Ethan the protest and MIT. Keisha took his hand, her voice firm. "You're changing the world, but you have to protect yourself. Don't let them take away your fire." He nodded, but inside he knew the pressure was mounting. A memory suddenly came to him when he was 8 days, sitting in the public library dreaming of a future where his mother didn't have to work herself to exhaustion. "I'm almost there," he thought, but each step forward brought new challenges. The following week at the MIT conference, Jamal stood on stage before hundreds of researchers and engineers. Dr. Nia Ellis introduced him with admiration, calling Reflector a breakthrough in AI fairness. When Jamal presented, his voice rang out strong, telling the story from Southside to Evergreen, from a self-taught coding kid to the creator of a tool that shook the education industry. The audience stood and applauded, but Jamal didn't feel like a complete victory. He knew that each step forward came with risks, threatening emails, opposing parents, and the pressure of becoming an unwilling symbol. When he returned to Chicago, Jamal received an email from a major tech company offering to buy the rights to Reflector for 7 figures. He read the email, his heart racing. The money could change his and his mother's life, no more night shifts, no more cramped apartment. But he remembered Maya's words from the workshop. "Can I make something like Reflector?" If he sold it, Reflector could be turned into a commercial product, losing its original purpose. He replied to the email with a brief line, "Thank you, but Reflector is not for sale." He closed his laptop, looking out the window where the lights of Chicago flickered like dreams. He had chosen the harder path, but the right one. 6 months after the storm called, Reflector Evergreen Prep Academy was no longer the school Jamal Washington had walked into with a heart full of doubt and an old laptop. The marble hallways, once cold with contemptuous glances, now carried a new atmosphere, not perfect, but warmer, like a home gradually repairing its cracks. The display cabinets showcasing alumni medals now had a new plaque, Washington Innovation Scholarship, engraved with Jamal's name as a statement that he was not just a scholarship student, he was someone who changed Evergreen's history. But for Jamal, standing in the small living room of the Southside Chicago apartment, the real light did not come from the plaques or articles, but from the dreams he was planting for others. The Washington family apartment remained humble with cracked walls and the hum of an old refrigerator, but now there was a small corner that Jamal called his laboratory, an old wooden table piled with AI books, a computer screen gifted by Dr. Nia Ellis, and posters of Mark Dean and Katherine Johnson hung on the walls. Keisha walked in still in her nurse's uniform, but with a brighter smile than ever before. "Jamal, look at this," she said, holding up her phone. A post from the New York Times appeared on the screen. 12-year-old Chicago student launches global movement for fair education. Below was an image of Jamal at the MIT conference, standing beside Ellis, shining like a beacon. "I never thought my son would get the world's attention like this," she said, her voice choking with pride. Jamal smiled, but his gaze showed a hint of weariness. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind. Reflector had been downloaded by over 10,000 schools worldwide, from small schools in Nigeria to prestigious academies in Tokyo. Educators were using it to analyze textbooks, lectures, and admissions processes, revealing biases they had overlooked. But each step forward for Reflector came with its own challenges. A coalition of educational publishers had attempted to sue Jamal, accusing him of defaming the publishing industry by highlighting bias in textbooks. The lawsuit was dismissed with legal support from Dr. Lorraine Hayes, but threatening messages on X continued from anonymous accounts calling him a saboteur to racist comments that forced him to lock his personal account. Today, Jamal was preparing for a special event, a Code Your Truth workshop at the Southside Community Centre, where he would teach 50 children from underserved areas how to program basic AI. He had organised dozens of such workshops in the past 6 months, but this one felt different. Ethan Bennett, once his bitter enemy, had volunteered to be a teaching assistant. Ethan's transformation was a big surprise. After his public apology on Instagram and support at a previous workshop, he had enrolled in bias training using Reflector to understand how he himself had contributed to the unjust system. Jamal still kept his distance, but he couldn't deny that Ethan was trying. Actions speak louder than words, Jamal had said, and Ethan seemed to be proving that. At the community centre, the children had gathered their laughter and chatter, creating a lively soundtrack. Maya, the girl with neat braids from the previous workshop, ran up to Jamal and hugged him. "Jamal." I made a simple weather prediction program, she beamed, showing her phone with the rough but proud interface. Jamal smiled, his heart warmed. "Great job, Maya. Next time try adding a prediction for the highest temperature." He looked around, seeing bright faces, Black, Latino and Asian children, people the world often didn't give opportunities to. He remembered himself just a few years ago teaching himself to code in the public library, dreaming of a future where he wouldn't be defined by his zip code. The workshop began and Jamal guided the children through building a simple AI model to analyze text. Ethan stood beside him answering technical questions with surprising enthusiasm. When a boy encountered an error in his code, Ethan patiently pointed out the issue, even admitting I made this mistake when I was learning. Jamal helped me understand how to fix it. Jamal glanced at Ethan, his gaze softening. Maybe he really was changing. But then a new challenge arose. During the workshop, Jamal's phone buzzed with a notification from Dr. Nia Ellis. Jamal Reflector just detected a global pattern of bias in international standardized tests. It shows that math questions favor students from wealthier countries. We need you at an urgent conference in Geneva next week. Jamal read the message, his heart pounding. An international conference, he had never left Chicago, let alone travelled abroad. But the thought of Reflector influencing global testing made him feel both excited and fearful. He quickly replied, "I'll be there. Thank you, Dr. Ellis." When the workshop ended, the children ran out to the playground, leaving Jamal and Ethan to clean up. Ethan broke the silence. "Jamal, I know you don't fully trust me, but I really want to help. Reflector changed the way I see things." Jamal paused, looking Ethan straight in the eye. "I see you're trying, Ethan, but you need to understand it's not just about fixing mistakes. It's about living with the stares, the whispers every day." Ethan nodded, his gaze lowering. "I'm learning that, and I want to keep learning if you'll give me a chance." Jamal didn't answer immediately, but he nodded slightly, a small sign of reconciliation. That night at the apartment, Keisha prepared a special dinner, beef stew and cornbread, Jamal's favourite. "I heard you're going to Geneva," she said, her eyes sparkling. "My son from Southside to the world." Jamal laughed, but he told his mother about the threatening emails, about the pressure of becoming a symbol. Keisha took his hand, her voice firm. "You're not doing this to be a hero, Jamal. You're doing it because it's the right thing. And I'll always be here no matter what the world says." Her words were like a breeze blowing away the clouds of doubt in his heart. He opened his laptop, checking the map of Reflector usage that Dr. Ellis had sent. Red dots scattered across the globe from Brazil to India, from South Africa to Japan, each dot representing a school using Reflector to confront their own biases. Jamal sat back, feeling a deep connection to people he had never met. He remembered his dream at a world where his mother didn't have to work herself to exhaustion, where kids like him could rise up without being held back by prejudice. "I'm getting closer," he whispered, eyes fixed on the map. One final surprise came when he received an email from Professor Bennett. "Mr. Washington," it read, "I've signed up for training to use Reflector to improve my teaching. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I hope to prove that I can change." Jamal read the email, his emotions mixed. Professor Bennett, who had once made him feel small, was now learning from his tool. He didn't respond, but he saved the email as a reminder that change was possible, though slow and difficult. As the night fell, Jamal stood by the window, watching the lights of Chicago flicker like stars. He thought of Geneva, of Maya, of Ethan, and of his mother. Reflector was not just a program, it was a promise, a new light for those who had been left in the dark. He clenched his fist, feeling the strength of what he had done and what was still ahead. "This is not the end," he whispered. "This is the beginning."